Hi, I'm therapist and relationship coach Micah Ross, and I want to tell a couple of stories to help you kind of figure out if this free boost is for you. And this free boost is for you if you're playing enemy in your relationship. How do you know if you're playing enemy in your relationship? Most people, by the time they make a phone call to me, will say that they just miss their best friend. They miss their best friend that they married, and they're not sure how to get him or her back. And that can usually be a pretty good sign of you're playing enemy. Another sign is that you're fighting over the most ridiculous stuff. You find yourself fighting over everything. There was a day that my husband came downstairs and said, "By the way, you left the garage light on last night." And I turned it off. I realized a few things in that moment, and one of those things was that I wanted to scratch his eyeballs out with my bare hands. I also was in the beginnings of my master's program in counseling, specializing in marriage and family therapy, and I understood that responding from that place wasn't helpful, but I didn't quite have what to do instead. And so I just sat there for a minute, quiet, which was very uncharacteristic for me. We had a friend in town. Her name is Nicole. She's a mutual friend of ours. And I said, if Nicole had been here and left the garage light on, would you feel the need to the next day say, "Hey, turn that off for you"? And he said, "No, I wouldn't." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And he said, "I have no idea." And I said, "Well, I don't really have an idea either, but it really feels like you and Nicole are friends and you and I are starting to be enemies. So there just seems to be at some point, because probably some underlying issues, where you feel like the basic perception of each other has changed. And you might be doing things with the best intent, but the other person can feel like they're attacks or totally misperceive your intent. Or you can, like I somehow left the light on to irritate my husband and he had to teach me a lesson about it being left on the next day. That's not something you do to a friend. That's something you do to an enemy. So a second thing that you might be doing that might be a pretty clear sign that this boost is for you: if you don't like conflict. If you don't like conflict, if you avoid conflict, if you hate conflict, if you would rather sweep every want, need, and desire you have under the rug instead of engaging in a conflict, this boost is for you, and I guarantee you this leads to resentment, growing emotional distance, less emotional intimacy, and I guarantee you it leads to relationship issues. So what often is underneath not liking conflict is just not having enough skills, good skills, to get to the other side of conflict. And that might just mean you grew up with people who didn't know a whole lot about actually resolving things in a way that feels good to both parties involved. And if you feel like you're in this category, you are not alone. I swear over 90% of people can't do this. But once you have confidence in the skills, strategies, and mindsets it takes to get through conflict, I will tell you that for me, that has been one of the most freeing things in my whole life. To know that I can get through any difficult conversation and that I have the skills to navigate it and to get to that place where it feels like there's a win-win and we're actually resolving something instead of sort of spinning in this "I'm right, you're wrong, no, I'm right, you're wrong" conflict that goes nowhere is been huge game and life changer for me and for many of the couples that I work with. The third thing that you might be doing that might mean this boost is a good thing, great fit for you, is a little weird because you're not going to know that you're doing it because these things are totally unconscious. So I want to describe them anyway because they can be so powerful. So if you have issues in your relationship, I am willing to bet that you have beliefs that aren't serving you about yourself, about your relationship, or about life in general. And once you recognize what these beliefs are and how they color the perception of everything that's going on in your world and impacts how you relate with it, it can totally change your life. So most recently, I offered an online couples course, and I had a couple participate in it who got some pretty big results that I just heard about last week. So let's talk about all three of those things. Well, let's start with the beliefs. She realized she had some beliefs about herself that weren't serving her. She got really clear about what those were and started to shift them. She realized that those beliefs about herself were getting in the way of her having a conversation with her husband, and she had been avoiding it for a decade. So she used the skills to slice through that conflict and approach it in a way that wasn't going to be her sweeping her wants and needs and under the rug anymore, but it also wasn't going to be screaming and yelling and attacking him. It was realizing that third option of getting to that win-win and figuring out what that would be before she even had the conversation. So building up the skills and the courage to have that conversation with her husband. So both of these things combined, avoiding and the belief, was netting for them some pretty not so great results in the bedroom. The wonderful thing is that when she engaged in the shift and the change with this stuff, she told me last week that they're having sex like rabbits, and that she has desire again, and that she's excited to have sex. While participating in this boost, the whole goal isn't to have sex like rabbits, your sex life is a pretty good barometer for what's happening in your life and in your relationships. So I know that meant for her that she felt like her husband better understood who she is and how she is, that she better understands who she is and how she is, and she's getting from that some really big results in her life and relationship. This is what this boost is all about. I want to give you some awareness about those three categories that I talked about, which are very interrelated, and sometimes I see it linear and sometimes I don't. I don't think it always can be. You know, you have those beliefs about yourself, it gets in the way of having confidence about conflict or even knowing when to have conversations, and it leads to resentment, less emotional intimacy, and faulty perceptions of the other person, and that playing enemy, fighting about ridiculous stuff thing that we all do at some point. This boost is going to give you the skills, tools, strategies, tips, mindsets, exercises to start to learn to get your happy back in your relationship again and again and again and again. Knowledge is not power. I heard this from Tony Robbins last week, and I'm gonna repeat it. Knowledge is not power. Execution is power. Sign up for this boost, and I will help you execute these things in a way that you never have before. All you have to do is sign up.